so I'd like to call this meeting of the Anacortes Planning Commission to order. Ms. Watson? Ms. Gleichman, would you please take the roll?
Commissioner Mills, Commissioner McCombs.
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Commissioner Martin.
Here.
Commissioner Stoneman. Commissioner Duretsky.
Here.
Commissioner Courier.
Here.
And we did know that both Mr. Stoneman and Mr. Mills were going to be gone.
Chairman Martin?
Yes.
Can I make a motion that we excuse Commissioner Mills and Commissioner Stoneman?
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
I second that.
Okay, moved by Mr. McCombs, seconded by Mr. Ryan, I think I heard first, to excuse Mr. Stoneman and Mr. Mills. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, they are excused. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now we've had a request to just change the order, if this is okay with the commissioners. The request would be to put the public hearing for the comprehensive plan as item 5 and make other business item 6. Is that okay with you? Just switch those two around?
Yeah.
Okay. So for the public, so we're going to have the public hearing item number 5, and we're coming right up to it. So no minutes right at this time. Item number 4 is public comment. So this is a time for anybody in the public that would like to speak about something not on the agenda. Oh, and we have somebody wanting to speak about the comp plan. So that'll come in item 5 when we have the public hearing. But right now it's public comment time. So anybody that wants to speak about something not on the agenda, this is your opportunity. We ask that you come to the podium, that you state your name and your city, and we will happily give you 3 minutes. Okay, and not seeing anybody online?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, so with that, we will move to our public hearing. This is for the 2025 Comprehensive Plan update, and this is a continued public hearing. We have Ms. Grage coming to the podium.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Libby Grage, and I'm the Planning Manager in the Planning, Community, and Economic Development Department. We switched our order, so I'm going to zoom through some slides here. I just have a couple of things to go over before we open it up to the public for the public hearing, if that's all right with the commission. The staff's suggested order for this item on the agenda is to, as the commission requested, to briefly go through the Volume 2 updates of the comprehensive plan. We'll do a quick overview of the public comments that have been received throughout this process. And then staff will provide our recommendation. Then we would recommend opening the public hearing, taking testimony, and then closing the public hearing. And then the commission could move to deliberations and recommendation. So Volume 2 updates, the way that I was thinking about this was to have, so I have some slides here that have kind of the bullet points of the updates to Volume 2, and then if there are questions about each element in Volume 2, I can pull up the actual document and we can take a look at those sections to help answer those those questions, if that sounds all right with the commission. Okay. And before I commit to that, I better make sure that I have that ready to pull up. Okay, so just for those that aren't familiar with the how the comprehensive plan is composed, the draft plan has 2 volumes, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 1 has the introduction, the goals, and the policies, and the Planning Commission and the public, members of the public have discussed all of those elements within Volume 1 quite a bit. Volume 2 is the background or supporting information for the goals and policies in Volume 1. And so that Volume 2 contains the data and analysis and information that help to inform and support the goals and policies in Volume 1. So in Volume 2, there are kind of 3 areas where areas where we made updates, and those were to update the data and figures. That there's a lot of, acreage and demographic information and things that just needed to be updated because it's been 10 years since the last time we did this update. So a lot of that, we added a lot of information about the Growth Management Act and countywide planning policies and kind of the larger overview of, or the larger context of the planning that we're doing right now. And then also we made updates to ensure that the elements comply with state law. So this first one, we had this first slide here because Chris Como from Transpo Group, who is our consultant on the transportation element, is here for the next item on the agenda as well to talk about the development regulations for Division 5, which is the public street standards. And so I am going to ask him to come up and just give a brief overview of the changes in Volume 2, and I can pull up that section. Does that give you what you need?
Yeah, that's
okay.
great.
All right. So here's Chris.
Thank you, Libby, and good evening, commissioners. I've been here before talking to you about the goals and policies, I believe, and so hopefully some of this will resonate. But please, if you don't understand something, stop me and ask questions. I'm just going to give a quick summary, try to be brief, and hopefully you've all seen this. As Libby was saying, there's a lot of background information here, and this is all required by the GMA. You have to have basic inventory, so you update it each time you go through the cycle. It's really basic stuff. We're talking about roadway inventories, freight routes, and things like that, air travel, rail travel, those kinds of things through the community. So we start with, okay, here's the big road network. We talk about state highways. DOT has specific things that they like to see in these comp plans, and DOT does review these things. So it's important to cover all of this. Functional classification is one of the most basic things with a street network. That is the different types of roads. In fact, we're going to talk about that as we get into the development regulations later on. Just some really basic transportation planning stuff. Again, this is all the functional classification, different types of roads and the purpose and function that they serve, how much of those exist in Anacortes. This is the old map replaced by new maps. They're not shown in here, but all the text is being updated. Freight truck routes, things like that. Here's the new truck route map. Going through different things the city does, street repair and maintenance, a very important function. Talk about the transportation network from a modal standpoint. This deals with vehicles here and level of service standards, but the new GMA requirements require multimodal level of service standards, so we start to get into different modes. This is showing intersections, at present. There's another section later that shows the future. The indication is that there's only a couple intersections that aren't going to maintain level of service standard over the 20-year planning period, and those are addressed in here. We start getting into the ADA requirements of GMA. The city has an ADA transition plan. Here's the existing sidewalk network, so that's been updated. Bicycles and trails. And then this is new. This is part of the new GMA requirement of establishing an active transportation network throughout the city. This is supporting the multimodal level of service standard strategy for the city. And this is the network. You'll see more of that with the development regulations later. Coordinating all this with state highways, they have special requirements going into a safety analysis for this city using this new safe system approach. This is the establishment of those level of service standards for multimodal, the active transportation network, and the status of the network as it exists today in terms of whether it's complete, incomplete, or doesn't exist in places. Of course, we cover transit and the collaboration with the city and the transit agency. I'm sorry, I don't want to make anybody dizzy. There's a lot here. Sure. Okay. This is showing the existing transit service through the center of Anacortes. I will say that Skagit Transit has been updating their plans as well, and they've just created a long-range transit plan, which they may make some recommendations for future service changes. Those are not included in the existing conditions section, but they're talked about in the future section in terms of, you know, the city should definitely be collaborating with the transit agency. The city's required to establish transit level of service standards, even though the city is not a transit provider. The way that this is arranged is that because the city does control the public right-of-way and has an interest in making sure it's ADA compliant, merging the two and saying, hey, for the benefit of the transit agency and the city, we're going to use ADA compliance with transit bus stops to get mutual benefit for both agencies. Use transit bus stops as a way to prioritize ADA investments when you go to program things like your 6-year TIP or other investments, and hopefully that helps build out the system and make transit that much more accessible. Oh, I'm sorry. This happened here once before, I think. I'll try to be right up here, but please let me know if I'm not loud enough. Like I said, air travel's in here, marine travel, we get into rail and ferries. Ferries obviously is very important here in Anacortes. Here's the future section. What we do is we take existing conditions and we forecast using the regional travel demand model that the Skagit Council of Governments has to come up with the numbers that we need to forecast 20 years ahead and imagine what some of the conditions might be on the transportation network. So there's an explanation as to how all this methodology works. These are the growth forecasts for all of the areas within the county, including the city of Anacortes. The model is really, it's a computer. It's dividing the county and the city up into little analysis zones, assigning employment and housing, and then it distributes those trips generated from the employment housing across the network. I'm not going to get into all the details, but that's the essence of how it all works. And so it forecasts where you're going to find, say, congestion at intersections and things like that. It's a good model, but it's roadway based. It doesn't have information on pedestrians and bicycles and things like that. It's vehicle based, essentially, roadway. So here's what that looks like in terms of forecasting the future for the whole county, and it is a county-wide model. We just took the pieces for Anacortes that were relevant to the city, looking at the different intersections, and there are a few that don't meet standards in the future. This shows what those look like. The ones in red here are below standard. The ones shown with an orange circle are also below standard, but this is important. These are all PM peak hours, so the busiest time of the day, although not including ferry pulse traffic. And so what it's indicating is that these are the places that the city needs to continue to monitor over time. There's nothing that necessarily has to be done right away. There is one in the city at 12th and K. It's already on your 6-year TIP. City's already addressing that. It's got a grant to do a study. And so the city's moving forward on that. The others, city will keep its eye on things. If it's a state highway, and there's a couple of those on here, the city needs to work with DOT Whether there's funding or not remains to be seen, and it might not happen until much later. Remember, this is 20 years out, so there's a little fuzziness here. So looking at what the future transportation needs might be, again, this is a list that shows what projects may be needed. There's a link to the safety plan that was done for the city, and these are indicative of those corridor projects calling for safety improvements, and here's another list showing those. And the active transportation list, here's the map showing segments of the active transportation map we saw earlier, and these are individual segments called out as project improvements. And then there's a financial analysis, which GMA requires, showing city revenues available, and what the city has some options to do to either increase revenue or reduce costs or come up with some other way, maybe adjusting policies about level of service, things like that, that GMA allows to make sure that the city has a way to pay for what it's saying it needs to accommodate growth. And that's the essence of it. And I hope I didn't go too fast, but I don't want to take too much time away from Libby's presentation here. You can see this is all strike through here, the old transportation element. So
Let's just see if commissioners have any questions. No questions.
excellent.
Actually, I have a question.
Yeah.
You'll probably cover it in the next section. Let's see if I can even find it. I was a little confused about the primary and the secondary.
The network.
Yeah, secondary active transportation network and the primary active transportation network. And I was not really sure what's the difference.
Well, so I'm going to try to find the map, but the difference is the primary network is, whoops, that's Parks and Rec. Primary, what's that? Where's the bookmark? Ah, there we go. Thank you. There we go, active transportation. So the primary network is focused on the higher classification streets. I'm going to find the map here real quick. Here we go. So the dark blue lines are those, if you had the road classification map side by side with this, you would see the dark blue lines are consistent with the primary or principal arterials and the minor arterials, whereas the light blue lines on this map, the active transportation network, are consistent with collector streets and local roads. And what it's suggesting is, from an active transportation standpoint, when you've got a busier road like a principal or minor arterial, you want to make sure there's dedicated bicycle facilities on the roadway, as well as pedestrian facilities usually off of the roadway, sometimes a bikeway separated from the roadway. And so that's what this map is indicating. The primary is the larger streets where there's more traffic volume, higher speeds. Maybe there's a need for higher classification bike facilities in those places. Maybe more protection. And the light blue is saying, you know, these are places where perhaps bicyclists could share the roadway with vehicles. There's lower volumes, lower speeds. They're neighborhood streets, essentially. It's probably okay to be on a bike and not have to worry too much about traffic conflicts.
Okay, so looking at that, Oaks Avenue looks like it's both dark and light blue.
Well, there's a parallel section on the south side of Oaks. Those are really neighborhood streets.
I see.
12th and Oaks, all the way out to the ferry, that's all principal arterial state highway. And so it's suggesting that maybe a separated or protected bicycle facility would be appropriate there.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
I don't think we have questions, so thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Excuse me. So I'm going to go back. And I'm just going to leave this, unfortunately, in this mode so I can easily go back and forth between the the background document and my slides. So the next element to talk about with the updates to Volume 2 is the land use element. And the main updates within that background document were to make changes to the requirements for the land use element. The GMA has certain requirements that the element has to meet, and so we've just updated what those are within the element to reflect the current state law requirements. We added a section on the Skagit countywide planning policies. We updated the existing land use pattern descriptions and data, updated population information, and the growth allocation information. And we also updated the land capacity data and the future land use map. Is there anything specific that the commission would like to talk about within the background information for the land use element?
Are the growth allocations the same that we have seen and talked about?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing?
Okay, I'll move on. The next element was the housing element, and with that, we, again, there are some new requirements under GMA, so we just made sure that our list that identifies what's required was updated. We added some discussion about the countywide planning policies again, removed some outdated information and updated community profile data. There's also a section added to discuss the 2023 Housing Action Plan and the related public engagement process that went along with that. And there are some updates to the housing inventory, production, and cost trends discussion, as well as a new section about housing and service needs, and then the projected housing needs by income band, which is one of those new GMA requirements that we include in the comp plan.
And we have seen that one, correct? The housing and service needs by
Yep.
income band, I think we've seen.
Yeah, it's all, it's the same information that was pulled out of the land capacity analysis that the commission reviewed, and so yes, it's all the same.
Okay.
Just pulled into this background section. Anything else on housing that you wanted to talk about?
No?
Okay. A lot of the same. In the economic development element background, there was the report in 2025 from Western Washington University. The economic development had a lot of good economic development information in that report, so we added some of that into the comp plan background information. Added a new section about economic development landscape that also comes from the Western Washington report, including a SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses. O is don't remember, and threats, opportunities. Thank you. We added some sections that talk about other, plans within the region that talk about economic development, and also local organizations that are involved in economic development. We also updated the employment conditions information and updated the sections about the marine industry and visitor industry conditions and data.
And what was the source of those?
Well, we can take a look. So for the visitor industry conditions, this was all developed by Leland Consulting was the lead on the economic development element, and so they did the majority of this work. If there's a specific piece of information that you're wondering about the source for, then I could look for that, but
I was wondering about that, just, okay, their strengths and weaknesses. And did they get a group of community members together? How did they, since it was a consultant that wrote it?
So it looks like this is taken from the marine industry conditions information was taken from the Maritime Strategic Plan, which was adopted by the city in 2022. So they did not do their own work on this particular SWOT analysis for the marine industry. It was information borrowed from another report.
I don't see questions.
There's not very much there. There's some source information down here at the bottom for some of this data. Anything else on the economic development section?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Next is the environment and conservation element background information. And again, similar to the others, we added some language just kind of tying things back to the Growth Management Act and what the requirements of GMA are in relation to these different elements. There was some sort of grouping of different elements of the environment, some reorganization, so talking about, instead of just focusing on critical areas, kind of broadening out the discussion in this section to talk about the land, different aspects of water in Anacortes, so the watershed, marine shorelines, lakes, streams, and creeks, and groundwater. And then the flora and fauna, there's some discussion about the native vegetation found in Anacortes. Looks like animal species to be updated. There's a section about atmosphere, which includes climate and air quality. So this is just kind of existing conditions discussion. And then it moves into critical areas that are regulated by the city under the Growth Management Act. So the fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas, wetlands, frequently flooded areas, geohazard areas. And then these sections that were in the previous comp plan have been relocated into, climate element. So those are taken out of the environment and conservation section. That's it for environment and conservation, unless there's any questions.
So when there's a part that's going to be updated, just thinking about the possibility of adopting this tonight, how does that work?
Can you say the first part of the question again?
Well, you passed one that just a minor thing, the animals, in
Yes.
the environment is going to be updated. If we were to approve this, to move forward to the city council tonight with something that needs still to be updated, how would that work?
If the planning commission would like, you could, part of your recommendation would be, to adopt the comprehensive plan as written with the following changes, and that could be one of the recommended changes to update that information.
Are there other areas that need to be updated still?
Not that I am recalling that one. Not that are jumping to my mind.
Okay.
That one kind of caught me by surprise. So, but that could be one option if the commission wanted to do that.
And if we didn't, it would just be adopted the way it was?
Yep.
And nobody would have to update that part? Got it.
Should we move on to Parks and Recreation?
Yes, please.
Okay. So again, tying things back to the Growth Management Act and requirements for the Parks and Recreation element and open space. I think in this section, there were some updates to the inventory. So this is kind of similar to the capital facilities element in that there's an inventory of existing facilities. So that's what these lists are of parks and open space facilities that are operated by the city. So just making updates to those descriptions. There's a section about park facilities under other ownership, so making updates to that section. Some updated information about the Parks and Recreation Department's programming. Community partnerships. I think since the last comp plan update in 2016, the city of Anacortes has officially taken over the management of the Senior Activity Center, and so there's some focus on adding additional information about that. These are the park's elements adopted level of service standards for different types of park and recreation facilities. And finally, a list of potential park improvements over the life of the plan, so over the next 20 years. This is identifying, this is actually identifying service improvements.
Can we go back and read the Guaymas Trail? Much better. Okay, so there's no prioritization of any of these, just these are the possible projects.
Yeah, it looks like it says, using the list below, staff can work with Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission to identify grants, private donations, and other funding to address priorities and opportunities. So prioritization would, likely happen through the capital facilities planning process, which that plan is updated every 2 years, I believe.
Yep, I think they're working on that right now.
Yep. So here's an updated list of specific park improvements. Sorry for the scrolling. I wasn't going to do that. See if I can get back on track. Funding options, it looks like there aren't very many or any updates to that section. And then I think the rest of this is just strike through. Looks like, yep. And then we get to transportation. Anything else on parks, recreation, and open space you'd like to talk about?
So if a community member was interested in a particular park or a particular park improvement, going to this volume 2 and taking a look at what it says might help that community member to know what the thinking is going down the road, however long it would be until whatever improvement they might be looking for. What I'm saying is they would be able to see that, oh, yeah, the city is thinking about whatever it is that they were wondering about.
Right, yeah. Ideally, this element identifies what the needs over the next 20 years to accommodate growth, to meet the adopted levels of service, what those improvements would be. But, it's usually not at a very detailed level. It's very broad. And then you get into the more detail with the 6-year capital facilities plan where, you're getting more detailed about the projects and you have funding mechanisms identified. And so this 20-year plan is just, yes, more broad. But still a good resource to see the universe of options or the universe of things that are being considered.
Right, thank you.
Okay, we talked about transportation, so capital facilities background. So in that section, adding some language about green infrastructure, which is a new requirement under the Growth Management Act that we inventory and plan for green infrastructure. And then this goes into existing capital facilities and future needs, the water section, just making updates, future facility needs. This is the 20-year, sorry, it's so small, I know it's hard to read, but the 20-year capital plan for the water system. And then funding options, and then similar for our wastewater system and stormwater. That's it for capital facilities. Any questions on that one?
No?
Okay. All right. Utilities. So the utilities element is really about mostly the non-city owned utilities, the electrical Electricity, telecommunications, and natural gas. So we've inventoried those services in the city and looked at those entities' long-range plan documents that are available to the public and tried to incorporate that information into this background information. So short chapter. And then we get to the climate element background, which is, it's all brand new. So, and most of it it's taken from the reports and analysis that the Planning Commission had gone over in pretty in-depth with makers who's doing the consulting on this element. So taken from the greenhouse gas inventory or emissions inventory and the climate vulnerability assessment that was completed. So you've seen all of this information before. It's just incorporated into this background document for the plan. Is there anything specific that you want to look at in that section?
Looks like no.
Okay. We've gone over all of the Volume 2 background elements. Is there anything else that the Commission wants to touch on for that section of this evening?
I appreciate you going through. There is a lot of reading here to
Yeah,
look at.
understood, yes.
But just understanding that is very helpful.
Okay, excellent. Great, so the next item, current slide. Okay, so the next thing was to just give a brief discussion about the public comments that we've received on the comprehensive plan. So you'll recall that our public participation efforts were informed by the public participation plan that was adopted by Resolution 3156. So that talks about, how the city is going to make sure that members of the community are informed about opportunities to comment on drafts and attend public hearings and all of the ways that the city is going to do outreach and make sure that people know about the process and have the opportunity to comment. And so we've been following that plan. The city has been accepting written comments pretty much since the initiation of the comprehensive plan periodic update, so the beginning of 2024. And then as we've been getting those written comments, we've been posting them to the project web page, so they've been available for whoever wants to look at them to see them over time. We've also had multiple advertised written comment periods and public hearings over the course of the last year and a half. And staff and with the help of our consultants has prepared a comment summary and response matrix that was in the Planning Commission's packet and also is available on the webpage for people to take a look at. This is just a summary of the sort of the feedback that we've been getting. So this has been a two-phase process. You'll remember we had the preliminary policy revisions with the revision trackers in the beginning of this process, and that ran from January 2024 to about July 15th, 2025, and we received 113 written comments, and that's separate pieces of correspondence. Within each of those, there are usually multiple comments. So this is just the number of actual letters or emails that we received. The Planning Commission held 5 public hearings on the updates to each of the elements. and there were a total of 12 people that testified at those public hearings. Phase 2 is when we released the draft 2025 through 2045 comprehensive plan on July 16th, 2025. And since then, we've received over 115 written comments. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on August 27th and held that public hearing open through September 9th, September 17th, and then tonight. And so far, we've had 18 individuals testify at those public hearings. Okay. So the staff's recommendation is, there are a couple of parts. So the future land use map amendments is what I was going to discuss first. The Planning Commission has, our staff provided an updated recommendation on those future land use map amendments a couple of meetings ago. It's on the webpage, and it's dated August 22nd, I believe, 2025. So there are 8 proposed, 8 areas where the future land use map is proposed to be changed. Land use map designation is proposed to be changed. And I'm happy to go through these in more detail or not, depending on what the commission would like. But this is the map that has been around that shows each of those areas, and each of these numbers corresponds to the very brief descriptions below on what the proposed change is. And then within the staff report, the staff recommendations, there is more detail and analysis, and then staff's recommendations. So this chart is just taking all of those proposals, 1 through 8, and trying to summarize the staff recommendation for the commission to make it easier so you don't have to dig through all of the documents. But in summary, staff's recommendation for all of the requested amendments was approval, with the exception of the Port of Anacortes' request in the Cap Sandy Marina area. Staff recommended approval of a portion of their request and did not recommend approval of another portion. And here is the map that shows that request. Hopefully, I know there's a lot of lines and colors, so the request was so this is Cap Sandy Marina, Anthony's, Safeway, R Avenue, Seafarers Way. And the request was to change this area within the white dotted line from a commercial designation, and there's a little blue area here that was zoned marine mixed use. So to change that entire area to commercial marine. Staff's recommendation is that this entire area east of R Avenue down to Seafarers Park be changed from commercial marine from commercial and marine mixed use to commercial marine. So that entire area. And that this parking, right now it's a gravel, kind of an informal gravel trailer parking lot behind McDonald's, that retain its commercial designation instead of being changed to commercial marine, as requested by the port. And then also, the port requested to change the designation of the Marine Technical College area south of Seafarers Park, which is currently marine mixed use, requested to change that to commercial marine, and staff also recommends that not be changed and that it retain its marine mixed use designation. So the rationale for all of that is explained in the staff report. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Mr. McCombs?
Yeah, can you quickly summarize, sorry, what was in the staff report in terms of, what's the implication? I mean, it seems subtle to me that, what's the difference between a commercial and commercial marine? And why do we care if that parking lot is commercial or commercial marine?
Commercial marine is a little, is more oriented toward the water, and it allows for a little heavier industrial uses than the commercial designation does. And so I think the rationale for staff's recommendation was that the area on the east side here has a water relationship. There's direct access to the water, and so it made sense to have that be changed to commercial marine, whereas on the other side of our avenue, there's no direct access. It doesn't really have a water relationship, and it would, kind of be its own CM designated parcel within the rest of the commercially designated area.
And just to clarify the record, it's our avenue becomes Q Avenue at this point. So it's actually, this is actually Q Avenue, not
Sorry.
our avenue. But I think we all know what we're talking about.
Any other questions about this one?
Okay. So those are staff's recommendations on the future land use map amendments. I'll just note here on number 6, that was the request by the city to the county to adjust the urban growth area boundary, and that request was approved and adopted by the Board of County Commissioners. So the urban growth area the boundary has been adjusted to include those parcels that the city requested. And so I think this recommendation would be to designate those as public. Those parcels that are now included in the UGA would be designated as public.
And I think number 7 is one that we discussed a little bit last time, and maybe when the commission is discussing again, that would be one to bring back up. We don't need to do it at this moment, but.
Okay. So that's the future land use map. And then, so staff provided a memo to the commission that contained the staff's recommendation with some additional changes to the comp plan based on our review of the public comments and other review. And so those are outlined in the staff recommendation. One of them is to add a new new policy to the land use element to comprehensively address critical areas. We had a couple of comments that recommended that we address that within the land use element. And so the proposal would be to add a policy that states, ensure that all development complies with the adopted critical areas regulations in the Anacortes Municipal Code. Critical areas include wetlands, frequently flooded areas, fish and wildlife habitat, conservation areas, geologically hazard areas, and areas with critical recharging effect on aquifers used for potable water. Any questions about that?
Seems fine.
Okay.
I'd just like to point out, that's not like a major policy shift. It's just recognizing the intent throughout our comp plan and supports our development regulations. So no changes.
Thank you for clarifying that. And then in the capital facilities element, there was a policy that had some additional language proposed, and it seemed to cause some confusion, and staff's just recommending that the proposed additional language be removed, just to keep that existing policy as is, except for changing money to funds.
That seems fine.
And then there were some changes in the environment and conservation element in volume 1. This, I think, was inadvertent to delete the term tsunamis, and so we're just recommending that we retain that word in this particular goal. In volume 2 of the environment and conservation element, the additional recommendations are to provide updated legible critical area maps, and then revise the language within this background information for talking about the ACFL and other critical areas within the city that are not within the ACFL but still require protection under the Growth Management Act. So that was just a clarification.
Just a little typo.
Uh-oh.
Second paragraph, values of critical areas. However, functions and values of critical areas located outside.
Where's spell check when you need it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
That doesn't really make sense there.
Pardon?
The word values doesn't really make sense. I wonder if that was supposed to be another word.
I'm sorry, I still didn't hear that.
I say the word values does not really work in context there. So I'm wondering if that should be a different word.
That's the term used by a Growth Management Act in relation to critical areas, is protection of functions and values of critical areas.
So you're going to protect the values of the critical areas?
The value that they provide to society, humans.
Okay. Strange language to me, but.
And I think in number 4, the provide update critical areas map in volume 2, we had received some comments that it was hard to read, so it's really more just a resolution change that's being updated, not any updates to the substantive text or meaning of that map. Correct?
Yep. Yes. And those maps are just illustrative only and not regulatory, so it's just information. And then the last one was to just make some slight tweaks to the language in this particular Parks and Recreation goal, recognizing that it might not always be appropriate for the city to acquire open space, but maybe there are some criteria that would apply prior to the city making acquisition of open space and land. So that's maintaining, establishing, and in appropriate cases, acquire a network of open space and public access corridors. So that was the thinking on that one. That's all I have for now. And unless there are any other questions, I'll have a seat and can open the public hearing or continue it.
Just so as you're thinking about this, we've provided those 2 memos explaining what our recommendations are. The FLUM, the future land use map, was a little, we just wanted to have it all consolidated in one place, so we provided that one recommendation document, and then there's the second one with these little fixes, these 6 ones that we went over. So in the memo, we also provided language if you wanted to make a recommendation today, how to include the staff recommended changes into the actual motion.
So this letter that was on our desk just now is the same one that's in the packet?
It is updated in the recommended motion part. Thank you for
Oh.
asking. We clarified that there's also the consolidated staff recommendations on the future land use map in the staff memo dated August 22nd. So we just wanted to make it really clear where to look for the specific FLUM amendments, as well as, we already pointed out the specific recommendation, the 6 additional amendments shown in staff memo dated September 19th. So we just tried to make it consolidate into one place, all of what to look for what would be recommended.
And then I see that there's a glossary on our desks now as well. Are you recommending that this be included in the comprehensive plan?
Yes.
Okay. That will make Mr. Mills happy.
I hope so.
No.
It may make sense to say, in addition to the 2 other documents, reference the glossary too,
Yeah,
if you're adding that to the adopted.
in the
comp plan.
motion. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. So now, thank you for wading through all of that, those of you that have taken the time to come. So this is the time that we will have a continued public hearing on the comprehensive plan. You're welcome to come up. I see we have one person signed up, so they get to come first, but anybody can come one at a time. State your name, state your city, and then there is a timer. Is it working? Okay, so there is a 3-minute timer. I think it's right over there for the audience.
And there's one on the podium as well.
And there's one on the podium as well. And I'm going to call the first person that actually signed up.
Kim
So-
McKinnon?
Yes.
Yes, that would be me.
Oh.
So,
Okay. Somehow you don't look like Kim.
yeah, well, come on, man. We can change names. My name is Pat Barrett. I live in Anacortes, Washington, and I am on the Anacortes Housing Authority Board, I guess acting chairman at the present time. In the audience is Sandy Cox, our director, and Kim McKinnon, our project manager or project facilitator for the Olson building. This comment is with regards to the Olson building and the changing of the zoning that is necessary to continue on with the plan and the project that's been in the community for the last 6 or 8 years. As we all know, or most know, that the Olson building was part of the purchase of when the port purchased the Marine Hardware building, and their intent at that time was to, in essence, gift the Olson building to the city of Anacortes for affordable housing. It's in the deed already that it is to be used for affordable housing. One of the challenges with the building right now is it's in LW, is that correct?
MS.
MS, and we need it where the goal is to rezone it as commercial. That would allow us to, it'll mitigate some of the parking requirements because we do not have land for parking there. It's a 5,000 square foot footprint for the building and only a 6,000 square foot lot. The port is not enthusiastic about giving us additional space for parking. That's going to be a challenge. We all know that. The port and the Housing Authority have been working together on this project on a lot of different facets. You have a letter from John DeMoss talking about kind of some details of how to deal with residents living in an industrial area. The Anacortes Housing Authority, per the letter from Sandy, talks about that. We're working very diligently to make sure that we work with the port on that. So there is no dissent that we're aware of within the community or within the property owners, and we would just encourage you as a commission to approve this or recommend it to the city. The council seems to be in line with it. The community's in line with it, and we need affordable housing in this community. It provides 27 units. That's the goal. It is not a perfect project. I will be the first person to tell you that, but we're doing the very best we can to make it a very good project with limited, with the facilities that we have. So, and we've raised a lot of money to do it. We've got grant funding. We have the sales tax revenue, and that's where we are. So anyway, we thank you for your work, and we would like you to continue to move forward with that plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Anybody else? Come on up.
Just one at a time, please.
Hello. I brought some notes.
Your name?
My name's Paul Whitrock. I'm on 7th Street in Anacortes here. And
I'm
I'll
sorry.
give you a break from the facts and figures.
Tell us your name one more time.
Paul Whitrock.
Thank you.
Sure. And I'm here to speak on the idea of a zone change for our neighborhood, which is just east of here, between the depot and City Hall here. It's the blocks between 4th and the Housing Authority building. Mm-hmm. And it's become clear that the zoning doesn't really reflect our neighborhood, which is zone CBD. And in the comp plan for 2016, I understand that there was a desire for it to be a transitional zone, which it really turned out to be, composed of residential, business, and civic uses, and it's become that. But it doesn't really reflect what CBD is becoming in downtown here, which has high-rise buildings and 0 setbacks. And our goal is to have our neighborhoods keep being a transitional zone like it is, not become another commercial street. And to do that, we need it to be zoned something else. Like, we're calling it the depot zone, but it can be called anything, but it needs to be some mixed-use zoning, and that's really what it is. But the details only would be that its heights would be restricted to like residential, what it is now, and like setbacks like a residential area, and keep the neighborhood a place that people want to walk and visit, use for civic uses like they are, people living there, not become another commercial avenue. And so the representative for our ward, Ryan Walters, has put together a nice, more technical, summary of what this would be, and he can speak the speak that you folks can relate to probably better. And I have that as a letter that hopefully you've received, and will drive to get it into the comp plan as a 9th item on the land use map that Libby has, or some form, to make this zone change happen in the future. And Ryan suggested it be a policy inserted into the plan, and I don't know how that works. Hopefully you do, and so I can make that happen. I've got my neighbors here that want to talk on it also. So thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have any questions I could answer?
Well, this is a public hearing, so it's not a time for questions back and forth, but I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Come on up.
Hi, my name is Julia Henry, and I live on 6th Street, just here in the same neighborhood that Paul was talking about. And I just wanted to reiterate what he said and how unique the little pocket is that we live in of homes and you know, my neighbors, and it's a residential area. It's a little tiny pocket, but and there's some commercial, and but we would like to have it not be just lumped into everything else, because it's a unique area, and we'd like to keep it that way. And I get a lot of people, I can't tell you how many people come by and take pictures of our neighborhood that are visiting. You know, they'll be going to the farmer's market, and they love the just, you know, the uniqueness of the neighborhood, the old homes, and, you know, I don't know, just it's a nice spot, and it's nice to keep some of the, I don't know, little different areas that make Anacortes a little different. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Brett Lunsford. I'm the Anacortes Museum Director, and I'm commenting in support of the staff recommendation to change the museum parcel zoning at 1305 8th Street from Old Town to public use, pointing out that it was built in 1910 and has been in public use from 1910 until present, first as the library and since 1968 as a museum. So as such is the oldest public use structure in the city of Anacortes. And so I think that echoes the staff recommendation. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone online?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, here we go. I'm about to close the public hearing after, is this the third or the fourth meeting, I think? We will close the public hearing, which means that we open for discussion with the commissioners. Anything you would like to talk about with regard to the comprehensive plan? Mr. Ryan, are you there? Not hearing him.
Yes, here I am. So did we go over some of the red lines in chapter 19? Or are we going to do that here in the future, or we already kind of like grouped that in as we were going by?
I think we're ready to have a discussion prior to any kind of an adoption.
So chapter 19, I believe he's referring to the development regulation updates, and that's going to be a separate agenda item, and we're not going to be making any deliberations on that tonight.
Okay. Thank you, John. And Ms. Coleman.
All right, well, I guess I want to talk about the future land use map. And last time, we did talk about the Olson building. The odd thing, at least in my mind, the odd thing was having half the block zoned one way and half the block zoned another. And we did talk about that a little bit. I understand that there's definitely a need for affordable housing, and this seems like a good opportunity. I'm referring back to the Port letter where they are recommending an actual cooperative with the housing authority, cooperative land use easement to align interests and avoid future conflicts through a formal easement. States in here that the port owns 3 out of the 4 sides around the Olson building, apparently. So what do you think about that, commissioners?
So what the port's concerns are that there's going to be industrial, essentially light industrial use right around, so noise, they don't say pollution, debris, dust, right around the proposed housing, right, which would be CBD.
Yeah,
I don't think they're recommending a change, they're just stating that fact and making an awareness around that, right? Because they went into this whole process knowing what the Olson building was gonna be. That's how I interpreted it, like
Okay.
more of a statement of, hey, this stuff is happening, we want you to be aware.
Mr. Ryan has his hand raised.
Mr. Ryan?
Oh, I was just gonna comment, on, one thing is, we're trying to make room for the Olson building. It's, pardon me, I got a stuffy head, so think is not my forte tonight. The parking around the Olson building, and we've obviously lost Second Avenue to the port. So, when it comes to making room for parking, I mean, I think that's just a reminder to the port that, hey, you guys have Second Avenue for the next 30 years. Little concessions would be appreciated.
Now, when we're talking about parking, I'm trying to separate in my mind. Now we're talking about development regulations, correct? Because that definitely is another issue to talk about. But I'm trying to separate in my mind, we're talking right now about the future land use map as part of the comprehensive plan. Mr. Dretsky.
I don't know how changing it to what they've suggested, how that changes any of the concerns about how it's going to be, how that block is going to be utilized by both. Whatever problems there are, noise, whatever, who cares what we call it? It's still, those problems are still there. And my suggestion, I think, is that, as we've seen in the past, the port is quick to show up with an attorney. It seems to me we need to have our attorney looking at the request and making a recommendation what they think is viable for the city. I don't know if that's out of place or fair or.
I don't think there's any legal concern. The city's made its recommendation and so has the backing of the city attorney in theory. Yeah, your point is accurate. Like the uses around it aren't going to be affected, nor are they going to differently affect the piece of property depending on what the existing zoning is. So whether it's CBD or MS, marine shipping, the use, it's still going to be affected the same way.
Is there any feeling in the discussions or communication that they would just as soon see the Housing Authority drop its plan and just walk away from that project so that the port can have the entire block?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, I mean, I'm asking your an opinion, and that's tough because I'm sure they're not going to walk in. I'm sure they haven't walked and said that's what they want to do, but.
Mr. Courier?
Yeah, I'm just curious, Mr. Coleman, is there any conflict at all? I mean, like, to Pat's point, I didn't see that there was any conflict with the port and the Olson building and the project there with affordable housing, other than just making people aware of the port doing port business right next door. From everything I read, I didn't see that there was a conflict.
I haven't heard any conflict or concern from the port about it being used for housing. I mean, they did
Yeah.
dedicate the property for housing, so I generally agree. My opinion is I agree with Mr. Courier's interpretation of the letter, but, you know, just saying, hey, you know, be kind of like those land use notices that you file with your property that says, you know, I recognize that there's agriculture in the area, and I'm not going to object to noise and odors from that. But I didn't write the letter, so that's
Right.
just my opinion.
And as far as the zoning request, though, there doesn't seem to be any conflict either between the owners of the Olson building and the port regarding the two differences on that same block, even though it's a little bit strange. Because is that a correct assessment?
Could you restate that?
Well, I mean, just with the suggested land use change for the Olson building versus the differences in that block, doesn't seem like there's a conflict between the port or the Olson building on the different, even though it's split up a little bit differently, typically you would see that whole area the same. But
Well, you often see zoning lines mid-block
okay.
based on historical use or adjacent uses. So is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so even though it's not congruent, it's not uncommon that something like that would happen. In a
Oh,
place
no,
like
our zoning lines jog all over. They go down alleys, they go in between lots to capture, say, you know, along a commercial street. Those commercials, the ones fronting on the commercial street would be commercial, but then the ones behind those might be fronting on a non-commercial street, so those might have a different non-commercial zoning. That's not uncommon.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Coleman, a procedural question with the future land use map. If there are opportunities outside of the comprehensive planning process to make updates to zoning and.
Yes. So what we're actually changing in the comp plan is the future land use map. It's not technically the zoning map. The zoning map and the future land use map are technically different maps. The future land use map it sets the future zoning. What we generally in practice do is we say, you know, after we've changed the future land use map, then we follow through with an ordinance saying, okay, the future land use map has been changed pretty much on the same day. As part of the zoning ordinance changes, we would change the zoning map to reflect what the future land use map says. So in theory, you could have something on the future land use map that is not yet changed on the zoning map.
But but you can do it out of cycle with the comprehensive planning process where you could have a change in zoning, or does it have to, do we typically
No, you can't
wait?
change the future land use map outside of a comp plan update. In theory, you know, on the annual update cycles, every year we have an annual comprehensive plan update cycle. People request zoning changes, and we do entertain some of those, including there's some on there from the 2021 comprehensive plan update request cycle that were deferred until this time. And they're lumped into this zoning, future land use map change.
So there would be an annual review of the future land use map. So if there were new proposals to change something that is currently CBD to maybe residential 4 or something, you could do that out of cycle with the 5-year planning process.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. I think I'm okay with the answer, yes. Are we ready to make a motion? This is the big one. right up on top here. Couple of different choices of possible motions.
Chairman Martin, I'll give this a try.
Okay?
It's a mouthful. I make a motion to recommend to the City Council that adopt the proposed comprehensive plan amendments and future land use map amendments with the 6 additional amendments shown in the staff memo dated September 19th, 2025, and the consolidated staff recommendations to the future land use map shown in staff memo dated August 22nd, 2025, as well as adding the glossary that we've mentioned.
Speaking of the mic,
Do we want to include something about the one section that hasn't been presented to us yet? We approve this with the intention of seeing that when it's completed? I think it was on animals.
The wildlife.
Wildlife.
So I would add to that motion that we would want to review the additional part of the comprehensive plan regarding wildlife that we're anticipating an update to.
for final.
Okay.
Second that
Okay.
motion.
All right, let me see if I can restate. I'll do my best. This is a motion by Mr. McCombs and seconded by Mr. Courier to adopt the proposed comprehensive plan amendments and the future land use map amendments with 6 additional amendments shown in the staff memo dated September 19th, 2025, and the consolidated staff recommendations to the future land use map shown in the staff memo dated August 22nd, 2025, with the addition of the glossary. I don't know how else to reference it. The glossary that was just given to us, and in addition, an unfinished section pertaining to wildlife in Volume 2. Any further discussion? So at this point, we're having a conversation here. Any further discussion? If not, Ms. Gleichman, I think, go ahead and take the roll.
Okey-doke. Commissioner Mills? Commissioner McCombs?
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan?
Aye.
Commissioner Martin?
Yes.
Commissioner Stoneman? Commissioner Jaretsky?
Aye.
Commissioner Courier?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. I just again want to reiterate a thanks to Ms. Grage, big thanks to Ms. Grage, and also to Mr. Coleman. This has been quite the process, and now what we do is we pass it to the City Council. Okay, all right. Next item on the agenda is development, a comprehensive plan update, development regulation amendments discussion.
Thank you. And thanks to the commission. It's a tremendous amount of work for you as well. So thank you for all your work on the comprehensive plan. So the next item here, development regulation amendments, we are specifically talking about Division 5 in Title 19, which is contains the community design provisions. So the public street improvements that are required when new development occurs, the design of new public street improvements and private driveways and access. And again, I'll invite Chris Como from Transpo Group to come and walk us through the proposed amendments. started right there. Does that work okay?
Thank you, Libby. And hello again, commissioners. I want to start off by saying there's a couple things I just want to make clear. The document that we presented earlier, the transportation piece, a couple things. The active transportation network, that was largely based on the 2016 work that the Anacortes Bikes and Walks group did. That was part of your former comprehensive plan. And the long list of projects from that active transportation network were helped with prioritization from the Anacortes Bike and Pedestrian Committee. Those are important things because they're going to come up in the development regulations tonight in terms of the active transportation network. I also just wanted to let everybody know that the work that's been done on the transportation portion of the comp plan, as well as these development regulations, the comp plan piece has already been reviewed by the Skagit Council of Governments staff and has been recommended for certification approval. That's a piece that GMA requires. Each transportation element has to be certified as compliant with GMA in order for the city to be eligible for state and federal grants for transportation. So that's a really important piece, just going in and know this. And of course, what we're going to talk about is these development regulations. The comprehensive plan sets the framework, the goals, and the policies. The development regulations implement all of that. And so we're going to talk about the updates that need to be done in the code so that when projects come in, staff knows how to make sure that what happens on the streets is consistent with the comp plan intent and goals and policies. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to scroll through this document. I apologize, but there's several sections, and we're just going to highlight the underline and strike through portions. You can see in the introduction here, this is section 19.50. The first thing under E, section E, is we're linking this with the active transportation map that you saw from the transportation element, and that's the first big thing here. So right up front, here's the active transportation network. This is really key for everything that's going to follow. There's another map in here, the functional classification map that we mentioned during the last discussion, and we'll hit that in a minute. But those are the two key things in here. So we're adding these graphics as reference points so that anybody can always reference back to these if there's any confusion between primary or secondary. We talked about that a little bit, and those are really important terms, and you're going to see those in the different tables and graphics in this document. So no changes. This code is actually in really good shape. We're just trying to make sure it's consistent with the comp plan. A few minor edits, this one in particular. We just want to make sure that the city is using the most recent edition of the trip generation manual. This is really common. In fact, they've just updated the trip generation manual to the 12th edition, so we just want to make sure that it's always the most current edition that's being referenced. We're replacing the word roadway with streets. That's much more common in city environments, and this is just trying to be consistent throughout the document with this. We're referencing the ADA transition plan in terms of sidewalks needing to be ADA compliant. Little things so far. Strike through, this is just reordering some of the language in this particular section, E. We'll get to some much more substantial stuff here real soon. Again, some minor edits here, actually changing the word sidewalk to street frontage because the active transportation network includes both pedestrian and bicycle. And street frontage implies that you need to finish off or complete the street in terms of what the street standards call for. And sometimes that's both pedestrian and bicycle, not just pedestrian. So changing sidewalk to street frontage is more inclusive of those facilities. Moving on to street design, chapter 19.52. Again, down here, this is just some language to reference and link it to the tables that are going to come later in this section. Exhibit A is that active transportation map that we already looked at. Here's the functional classification. I'm sorry, Exhibit A is this functional classification map in this section. Again, the point of functional classification is to establish purpose and function for each type of street. You'll see on this map in red is essentially just the state highway. That's the principal arterial through town, and it's the only one. The yellow is minor arterials, and there's several of those, but mostly in the downtown area and then around March's Point. And then the collectors are in purple. And the collectors are taking people traveling from neighborhood areas up to the higher classification arterials, the yellows and the red. And so that's kind of, the purpose and function is going from a higher classification down to a lower classification or vice versa. And then the local streets are, they're just shown in white. They're not classified. Federal functional classification is a really important thing for grants, transportation grants. You don't get to apply for one unless it has federal functional classification. It's a really important point. And there's a process for all of this. The city doesn't get to decide. They have to apply for classification, and that's through a process with the Skagit Council of Governments and the Washington State Department of Transportation. So it's a really big deal, and it doesn't change very often. So the map is relatively static, but when you do a comp plan update, you want to make sure you're reflecting anything that has changed. The city can apply for changes. It's just not very frequent. So we're going in here now to some definitions of principal arterials, and the code already had some language. We're just kind of refining that a little bit and making it really specific that in Anacortes, there's only 3 major segments of principal arterial, and they're listed here. Commercial between the roundabout at SR 20 and 12th Street. That's kind of the big commercial portion of Commercial Street. Then it turns the corner and turns into 12th Street, and then it turns into Oak Street as you head over toward the ferry. But that's the SR 20 spur highway through town. So the graphic that you see is kind of reflecting the kind of features that you would expect or do see on SR 20. And you can see that you've got 2 travel lanes plus a center turn lane, and then this is also depicting buffered bike lanes and parking, as well as some landscaping and then pedestrian features. This is important. It's also in parentheses under the words principal arterial, the active transportation primary network cross-section. So, like we talked about earlier, the dark blue lines on that active transportation map pertain to the higher classification streets where you might expect to find more traffic volume and higher speeds. And that's why you want to have these dedicated facilities. So this goes into some more language about what's supposed to be happening with this cross-section. I want to also say that we've tried to build in flexibility wherever possible. The world is not black and white. There's grayness and fuzziness all over the place. So what we're trying to do is give the city some tools to adapt and make sure that the right facilities are going in where they can. There are some places where things may not be feasible. We've given the Public Works Director the authority to use some professional judgment in those kinds of circumstances, and that's all documented in here. So there's these 3 sections that are documented: commercial between SR 20 and 12th Street, 12th Street to Oaks, and then Oaks out to the ferry landing. The minor arterials, again, we've specific.
Mr. Como?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
That's okay. In that Commercial Avenue, you wrote, or somebody wrote, about alternative options would be to remove parking along one side of the roadway and widen the parking and center turn lane to the preferred widths, because apparently the width is not ideal, as you're talking about some give
Yes.
and take. And I see that, you've narrowed the buffer and so forth in order to make it work. Just for my 2 cents, just speaking for myself, I would definitely get rid of the parking on one side of the street because of the big commercial vehicles that try and make that turn. I don't know if there's enough space all the way around. It looks like everything is kind of squeezed in right there at 12th and Commercial. So that would be it. You've written, or somebody has written, that is an idea. I would be in favor of that idea.
So this section of code is detailing some potential exceptions. And again, it's not just limited to that. It's giving the Public Works Director and the city the ability, as you move forward with different projects or improvements, the idea that, you know what, maybe there's not enough right-of-way, or maybe we can't squeeze everything into this defined space. So there's an opportunity to change what's being called for in the graphic that's depicted. Think about the graphic here as the ideal. We don't live in an ideal world all the time. Sometimes there's constraints that make it very difficult and we have to make adjustments. So we're trying to build that in here and say, here's some flexibility that the city has to make adjustments if and where necessary. But it's going to require that the Public Works Director make the decision or recommendation to the City Council for final decision. Of course, all of this would happen through construction and funding through the 6-year TIP and things like that. So there's a whole process involved, but it is trying to build in some flexibility to give the city the tools it needs to adapt.
Very good. Well,
Okay.
that's my 2 cents anyway.
Okay. So moving down to now, wait a second, I'm on the same section, aren't I? Am I going up or down here? Okay, there's the map. There we just covered this. Moving on to minor arterials. So again, we very specifically listed out all of the minor arterials. And as you can see, there's many more of these in town than there were the principal arterials. And so these are, again, the kind of the second-tier streets. They're just below principal arterials, but above collector arterials. They're essentially distributing traffic from the main road through town, the principal arterial, to some of the little commercial centers or community destinations. And so they're listed out here, and this is good to have in code because, the classification is not going to change, so there's no danger of the code being out of date or anything like that. If you do want to change functional classification, you would need to change this list in the code. But this kind of makes it a little bit more bulletproof from a standard standpoint.
Which brings me to my original question about the difference between the primary active transportation network and the secondary, because I have 2 pages. One says it's primary minor arterial, and the other says it's secondary minor arterial.
And we'll get to that. What I want to point out here is on the principal arterial, you're going to see that on the active transportation, it's only primary. There are no sections of active transportation network that are on the secondary portion of that network, and we'll talk about what's going on there. So to that point, the minor arterials, here's what you're talking about. This is the primary, active transportation primary network cross-section. What this is saying is that there are some minor arterials in that list and on the map where maybe some of these have more traffic volume than others. And on those, you might want to have more robust or dedicated bicycle or pedestrian facilities, maybe separated from the roadway in some cases. On other minor arterials, they don't have as much traffic volume, and maybe there's places where the speed limit's a little bit lower. And there, maybe you don't have to have that really robust bicycle facility or pedestrian separation or something like that. So that's the difference. We're going to go into some exceptions here or some special circumstances that might help explain what's going on. So we're in the primary section now. And again, this is the ideal for that portion of the active transportation network. It's depicting that there's only parking on one side of this particular roadway. That leaves space for these dedicated bicycle lanes. Now, these are simple, illustrated, standard marked bike lanes with 5 feet and a standard 4 to 8 foot or 4 to 8 inch stripe. And then you've got a separation buffer, which there's some flexibility that can be adjusted, and then a 6-foot sidewalk. Either of these can, in the case of if a multi-use pathway was planned, it could take the place of some of these. What this is trying to do is help staff say, again, this is the ideal. This is also saying underneath that left turn pockets would need to be provided sometimes at key intersections just to reduce conflicts and keep traffic flowing. And that's on a case-by-case basis. So here's the other one. This covers the secondary network, and what you can see here is that, again, maybe because there's less traffic on this particular minor arterial, maybe lower speeds, you've got parking on both sides, and you've got two-way traffic, and instead of dedicated bike facilities, you've got shared facilities. You can see these shared lane markings here. And that's, again, because if the speed's low enough, and speed is really important for shared facilities, as well as the number of cars or the frequency of cars, it might be okay for that to be the circumstance because it's on the secondary portion of the active network. It's kind of been We've looked at all the segments of the network, and we worked with the Bike Ped Advisory Committee, and they're basically in agreement that, yeah, here, this is kind of connecting something to something else. It might be okay for this to be a shared facility here. So here we get to, again, to a section that talks about some exceptions. And you got Q Avenue, because it's got a different configuration than a lot of these other minor arterials. So it talks about the unique cross-section here, and then it's, 3 lanes, and there's a depiction of it because it's so different. You can see it's got 2 travel lanes, but it's also got a center turn lane, and that's because this serves a little bit different type of traffic, maybe some more industrial traffic, trucks, maybe higher traffic volumes, things like that. And so again, you've got a multi-use path over here that's taking the place of some pedestrian bicycle facilities. It's been separated from the roadway, and that's kind of unique too. So it's just calling that out as this is a little bit different, but it's so different that we're gonna give it its own graphic and say that if development's happening along here, here's what the street frontage needs to look like. R Avenue is a similar circumstance where it's also got a different configuration. And you can see here, it's got a median down the center and 2 lanes. So this is probably the most robust minor arterial in all of the city. And it's got the higher traffic volumes and higher speeds. But it's also got a separated multi-use pathway. It's got really robust landscape separation. It's also got a sidewalk on the other side. It's got a lot of crossings too, I'll say that. So those things are just being called out because these are kind of unique. And again, there's some other things called out here in terms of some other streets. It's talking about the transitions on Commercial Avenue. There's different sections of commercial downtown and the highway portion. And then the Marches Point streets. And what that is talking about is this is giving the Public Works Director a little bit of discretion because that's a lot of industrial traffic. It's not really kind of city commerce or it's not a bunch of people going out there to visit or spend time. It's a different type of traffic, different land use context. So the Public Works Director has some discretion as to if development is happening, does it really need to have some of the features that are called for here? Now that would be a recommendation from the director to the council in the circumstance of whether street improvements are going to be needed out here. So trying to layer it with, a process and making sure things don't just slip through the cracks. Collector arterials, again, we list them out very specifically. It's a much longer list than either of the 2 above, the principal or the minors. And then we've got an idealized section shown here as part of the active transportation primary network, the dark blue lines. There's not very many of those. Collectors are kind of a lower classification. Most of them are on the secondary network, secondary active transportation network. And here's what an idealized piece, though, on the primary section would be, recognizing that maybe there's parking on one side, you've got dedicated bike facilities. They're not as robust as you might find in other places, but you've got the landscape buffers and the sidewalks as well. For the secondary portion, you can see again, you've got parking on both sides. Now they're narrow parking lanes at 7 feet, and that's usually because of the road width that's available. You've also got landscape strips and sidewalks. But again, you got shared facilities because typically you're going to find lower traffic volumes and lower speeds on these types of streets. And again, below that, there's some exceptions called out here, and I want to highlight J Avenue. This was an interesting one because even though it's on the primary portion of the active transportation network, it's an important connection piece. It's a different land use context. You've got parking on both sides. It's very narrow. It's not quite a 1-lane street, but it's definitely not 2 full lanes of traffic. It doesn't even have a center line, I don't think. And so this is calling that out and saying, hey, even though it's on the primary portion of the active transportation network, it's got these features, and we're saying that it's going to meet the standard above. So it's a bit of an exception. Just wanted to highlight that. There's a couple others here. H Street is one, similar situation. There's not a whole lot of land use adjacent to it that's calling for access, and so turn lanes aren't required, things like that. Parking may not be needed on this particular street, so if development happens, there can be some exceptions here. Again, the March Point streets are called out for the same reason as before. That's up to the Public Works Director to decide if it's going to be needed or not. Then we get to the local streets.
Just
And the
before you get there.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
Just going back to J, because there's an elementary school on that road, help me to understand. I just want to make sure that we're not jeopardizing safety on that particular road, and I'm not sure how you came to the decision of that this is a collector, but it's an exceptional collector. I don't know. It's a road with lots of children up and down.
I don't think this is the section of J that is in front of the school. This is a residential portion.
J between 22nd and 29th. So there's the pool on the corner, and there's Island View down the road. There's Youth Dynamics across the street. It's, I just want to make sure that that one is looked at carefully because there's school there.
We can absolutely take a closer look and make sure that we're not creating a situation that would jeopardize the safety of anybody. But I think we spent a lot of time on this one. We'll double check and make sure.
And when school gets out at that school, there is a lineup of cars that are in the parking spaces. They line up for actually all the way to 29th and kind of even around the corner sometimes. So.
Okay, I will very specifically look at this, and we'll get back to the commission
Great.
on this. I mean, I will promise that the intent here was to address what we saw as a residential portion of this street that was very narrow.
It is.
Yeah, and has parking on both sides. There was not a school present in the section we were looking at. I promise. That would have absolutely stood out.
Am I wrong? 20, yeah, J between 22nd
And if we've
29th.
mislabeled it, we'll look into that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are very clear looking at the context. So we'll make sure we've got everything straight here. So the local streets, these are not federally functionally classified, but it's important. These are part of the active transportation network as well in some cases, and these are where you're going to find shared use facilities for people walking and biking. You want to have sidewalks and pedestrian facilities, but it's just sometimes safe for people to walk back and forth across streets or bicyclists to go right down the middle of streets. The city had this categorized as high volume and low volume streets. We're just calling them local streets, and then there's two subcategories of high and low volume to clean it up a little bit. And this is what your typical local street section would look like. This is the idealized, of course, and then of course there's always exceptions to the rule. So there's this section down here talking about unclassified and new streets, and so we're making sure that again there's these layers and process in place for the Public Works Director to make sure that everything is consistent with the classified streets in the city. And then this last section, we get into there's a lot of updated text in here. And so this is now going to relate to some tables that are going to be down at the end. What we tried to do here, and you can see a lot of strike through here, there were some tables and graphics. We're replacing those. They're not changing that dramatically, so a lot of the red is a little bit of overkill. I just want to say that up front. It looks worse than it is. What the blue is trying to do is reorder some of the features that you're going to see in the table so that when you read this and then you looked at the table, they're all in the same order, and it will hopefully make it easier to read. And so these are just defining things, and much of it is similar to what was previously defined, but just calling things out, different features, travel lane widths, pedestrian facilities, separation with landscaping, things like that. And you can see there's been some of the strike through. And then again, a reference to another table, and this is specifically talking about public streets not on the active transportation network. So anything that hasn't been addressed on the active transportation network, this is a section that talks about what happens on some of those streets. And it's related to the tables that we'll get to.
Let's just stop for a second. Anybody have questions of Mr. Como? Okay. I still have a question, but I think I'm not sure what page you're on. I have a question on page 78 of 111. Oh, we're just about there.
78,
Okay.
yep, we're right here.
All
So,
right.
so this page starts to get into a section called deviations from the street standards in the tables. And so what this lays out is, you know, you've got these cross sections, the graphics that we've all seen. You've got these tables, and then you've got, it's calling out active transportation facilities, parking removal, changing parallel to angled parking or things like that, or vice versa. So this is a way to deal with deviations from what the standard calls for. So it's giving, again, some exceptions or ways to be more flexible if something doesn't quite fit. You can make adjustments to the separation buffer or rearrangement of curbs, sidewalks, and parking. So what was your question?
The first one is about the angled parking.
Okay.
You know, like down on 4th, for example, which is angled and back-in parking. I wasn't really clear. Are we leaving that angled parking in this ideal world?
This isn't proposing any changes. This is setting a precedent so that when new development comes in, they have to meet these standards. It's not changing anything that already exists, say, on a downtown street.
How do we change what's already there? We need to change that.
We are working on the downtown framework plan. I mean, there's an opportunity there perhaps to look at the downtown area, but that's, I don't know, that's beyond the scope of this.
Okay. And then where you talk about curbs, sidewalks, and parking removal, you say that some residential neighborhoods within the city currently have streets without curbs. We know that, gutters and sidewalks, blah, blah, blah. And they have made it clear to the city that they want the roadway character to remain as is. So because a group of people don't want curbs and sidewalks, then it's therefore safe?
We heard loud and clear in the various open houses and public meetings we've been to throughout this process. There is a section of the city, I believe it might be over by the Cap Santi area, that they like their streets the way it is, and I think we even heard it from some council members. And so we've built this in, and this is simply saying that, again, the Public Works Director has some discretion here. If somebody is really adamant about not wanting something to happen here, the Public Works Director can weigh in on a recommendation. The city also has, and it's in here, it was back a section further up, street frontage construction in lieu of street frontage in front of a particular parcel. And so that's another option where even if those people, if new development is happening and those folks don't want to see, say, a sidewalk or street frontage in front of that new piece, that developer may have to go do something somewhere else. So the city's not going to lose the value that they would have gained with new street frontage. It can be done somewhere else.
I'm just thinking about safety, and I'm thinking specifically, in my mind, I'm thinking about Skyline, because many of the Skyline streets have no sidewalks.
Well,
And
what I would say is that's essentially under the authority of the Public Works Director. I think that it's safe to say that most Public Works Directors, that would be a key part of their job, to make sure that they weren't going to create a situation that was going to somehow create a safety situation. And so, I mean, this is just adding some flexibility, giving the authority to the person who's running the department that's in charge of the streets. And again, it's a recommendation. Ultimately, it would be a city council decision.
yeah, but maybe we should reword a little bit where it's talking about the neighbors, making it clear that they would want roadway to stay the way it is?
Sure, if you have some suggested language, we can take a look at that.
That's Mr. McComb's job. It just sounds like, what it reads like is if I throw my weight around enough, then I get my way, that's how it kind of reads.
And that's definitely not the intent.
You're right.
And so we can reword it
Yeah.
to make it more palatable or make
Yeah.
sure that that's not how it's interpreted.
Do you have any thoughts?
I concur with you. I think I recognize the desire for flexibility in the language. So I think it's important, and I think it's important for people to have a say, like what their neighborhood looks like, right? If they're happy, they like it the way it is. I think that's important. I guess my concern is you leave, it seems like a lot of discretion to the Public Works Director and to make a somewhat, could be arbitrary decision.
Couple of things. First of all, I mean, it does call out local street cross-section, so it's a much lower classified street situation. You're not going to have a lot of traffic or a lot of high speeds. It's not on the active transportation network. That wouldn't be okay. And you know, it's got to be on these narrow streets. So it's trying to ratchet it down to a pretty specific situation. But we can definitely make adjustments if that's the recommendation.
I think it's a 80 to 90% as it is, and maybe we can have a few ideas how to tweak it, but I think I see the value of that being in there.
Mr. Courier?
I was just trying to pull together where I saw this was a city council meeting this week with the permitting consultation where in lieu of, with development, in lieu of frontage or sidewalk frontage, to be able to potentially, one suggestion was to put it into a fund so the city could allocate sidewalk, maybe expansion in certain areas more cohesively. I think that came up, but was that something that was alluded to here?
If I heard you correctly, it sounded like there was a notion that instead of requiring in lieu of construction, that it would be like an in lieu of fee or bond or something that the city would hold on to until it had enough money to go do something somewhere else.
Yeah, like kind of work on sidewalks in a specific area more cohesively than if a developer did something a ways out where there's just a little bit of sidewalk there. As opposed to,
I'm not a legal person, but I think it deserves some scrutiny by the legal staff to make sure that there's not some kind of conflict with transportation impact fees, that's their purpose, is to collect money to do exactly what you just described, and to have kind of dual funding sources that are collected for almost the same purpose would be a little bit interesting. So I wouldn't be the one to weigh in on that.
all right.
Mr. Dretsky?
I know several years ago, Whatcom County had a provision that if you could choose to put the sidewalk or curb in, or you could put a certain amount of money into a county fund that would be used for traffic signals somewhere where the county really deemed they needed a turn lane or they needed signals. So you'd be a part of that future improvement in a place the county thought was far more important than the sidewalk at your location. So
And what I would say is, that's interesting. I'm not aware of that, but Whatcom County also doesn't charge transportation impact fees.
And I'm not aware if they haven't changed that policy, but when my son built a home in the county, that was definitely an option that he had to avoid sidewalks and curbs in a pretty rural area.
Okay. So I've definitely made notes on this and the J Street situation. We can try to keep going. We're almost through. So this is where we get into the strike-through. This is the old tables and the old graphics, and so you can see that we've replaced that with everything we've just walked through. Then we'll get to the tables down here. These are the new tables, and you can see they're cleaned up, but what I wanted to show you is they're organized by street classification going across the columns here. And then on the left column, it calls out a particular design standard or feature. And so everything from functional classification down through the different features that you would find on those streets, and then it's segmented by Here you have general standards for all the streets. Then you've got public streets that are not on the active transportation network. And then you've got it segmented by primary active transportation network and secondary. And again, these are linked to all that code language above, referencing these particular table references here in the gray. So they're all registered with each other. And then there's a whole section of notes for anything that needs to be clarified about different features under the table here.
A question on the notes.
Yeah.
I don't see any mention about the parklets that are downtown. Should there be?
I would say that that might be something. Does the city have like a sub-area plan for the downtown that talks about that? Or it's actually something we're going to be looking at in the downtown framework plan for a commercial street. But it's not a typical feature of a street standard. It would be specific to that section of street.
Kind of takes the place of parking.
So, okay, but again,
Yeah, buddy.
Mr. Ryan.
was there a question?
Mr. Ryan, do you have a question?
No, I didn't. My son asked me a question in the background. I apologize.
Okay.
Understood. Okay, so back to commercial. So that I think is something that's a little bit outside of what we're talking about here. I think that's a choice that is being made from a community standpoint in terms of what should be the purpose of that particular section of the street, whether it's for people sitting down and eating or should a car be stored there. I mean,
Right.
that's a specific design feature for that specific street. It's not something that...
You could weigh into the fray because there is a fray there.
No, I want to stay out of that fray. So this hopefully provides some clarification for all the stuff that is up above in the tables. And then that pretty much finishes out this particular section. There's just some minor edits and cleanups here with the consistency of the language. And then we get down here to this very last section, and this was added in at the last minute. There's some very minor things that are changing here. And it says here in blue, there was a request to amend this section to provide the Public Works Director with the authority to approve driveway curb cuts greater width than 30 feet. So again, giving the Public Works Director some discretion and authority to make a decision based on local circumstances. And that's all I have to share.
I'm seeing head nods. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Como.
Sure.
Yes, thank you, Chris. It's a great walkthrough of that section. And I guess the only other thing I have to talk about is the upcoming schedule for Planning Commission. So I don't know if we want to do that now or under the Planning Department updates. I'll do it now, if that's all right with the commission.
Sure.
Okay. So the schedule outlook here. So tonight's September 24th, we did the public hearing. You made a recommendation on the comprehensive plan. Thank you. The next meeting we're looking at is a special meeting next week. Sorry, you don't get a break. On October 1st, so that we can follow back up on some of the items that the commission wanted to discuss more from the September 17th meeting. And then also there were some docketed amendment requests by property owners that we were going to spend some more time looking through in Division 4, 5, and, not 5, 4 and 6, I believe. Anyway, more to come. The packet for that is due tomorrow, so you'll be getting that soon. And then the October 8th meeting, we're thinking of canceling that one because we don't have any, well, John and I are not available, and there aren't any other items of business to discuss. And then the 15th, if the commission wanted to, if we needed to have an additional meeting on the development regulation amendments before our public hearing on October 22nd, then that would be an opportunity to do that. So maybe we could determine, after October 1st, how far we get, and if we can get through everything, then maybe we don't need another special meeting on the 15th. October 22nd then would be the public hearing for the development regulations, and also potentially deliberations and a recommendation to City Council on the regulation amendments as well. And I've added some additional meetings there at the end in case we need to have some extra time for the public hearing, or additional time for deliberations for the commission. That's all I've got. Are there any questions or concerns about that schedule? Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are on to item 7, Planning Department update.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. John Coleman, Director, Planning, Community, and Economic Development. Thank you for all your hard work. We passed, made a recommendation for the council to approve the comp plan tonight. That's fantastic. That means we can get it to them sooner than later, and they can start reviewing it and have more time to look at it before our required adoption at the end of the year. So as far as things that have happened, we're just with you mere 7 days ago. Hopefully, yeah, if you're interested, maybe you watched my presentation to the City Council about our development services updates. That went really well. It was well received by the council, and we look forward to making improvements in the planning department and their communications with building, planning, and engineering to make the permitting process move quicker, and so there's more transparency, and the community and applicants can understand the process better, and we're underway of making those improvements. But otherwise, there haven't been any planning commission recommendations that have gone to council lately, and so there's nothing to update there. Do you have any questions for the planning department?
No.
All right. Well, that is my planning department presentation for tonight. So thank you for your hard work.
Thank you so much. So with no further business, 8:15, we are adjourned.